Whether you are talking about your personal life, your political life, or your professional life, I cannot emphasize enough to you this slogan: talent is scarce. I think that all of us grow up in a school system that conditions us to expect another 40 people to be crowded into our lives every September. Every year, you're going to have a whole new circle of friends and a whole new circle of enemies and a number of new strangers trying to eat lunch with you. You know, we're conditioned to regard our colleagues, fellow human beings, really as disposable, really as easily replaced. And I think we're very reluctant to learn this lesson as to just how scarce talent can be. We will blame everything else, every conceivable factor will be blamed before blaming this one and then taking responsibility for our disregarding the importance of it. So we talk about people's personal lives. People are very ready to believe, oh, the problem is I'm too fat. The problem is if only I could get some more exercise at the gym, if only I could be more muscular, more attractive in this sense. You might think it takes a lot of humility, to see yourself that way. It really doesn't. I'm sorry, but incredibly shallow, incredibly stupid people with very little thought are able to be self-critical in that way. I think it's much more difficult for us to be critical of the society we live in as a whole, and then see our place in it, and then think strategically and think about our own kind of responsibility in it also. You know, just every day, my girlfriend and I go for long walks together. We have long conversations, and they sometimes remind me of people I knew in the past, that I've forgotten or haven't thought about for years. And we had a conversation about the way in which basically the world has gotten worse and worse. I get email from fans and viewers of the channel who seem to feel that the world is in some kind of terrible decline politically, culturally, and otherwise. And Melissa had also heard from a friend this way. And one of the things I said back was, no, young people today have no idea what it was like for my generation, how utterly alone we were when we went through high school, when we went through university. I didn't know a single other intellectual, period. I didn't know a single other like-minded intellectual. I mean, even on really mainstream issues in 21st century politics, I never met and knew a single other person who cared about First Nations politics, American Indian politics, Native American, these kinds of things. And I was out there looking. I never knew a single other person who cared about ecology and ecological politics. And I joined the Green Party. I gave lectures at the Green Party conference meeting. I was a very charismatic and memorable, person there. I went and I lobbied City Hall on ecological issues. I didn't just stay in my room playing video games or something. I didn't stay cut off from society. I was out mixing in society. I remember the one that really got to me. I never met a single other person who cared about the philosophy of Plato, Aristotle, any of the big names from ancient Greece, let's just say generally. And I was taking those courses. I took one course at a 400 level, the advanced final year course. The university actually made an exception to the rules for me to take that course because I wasn't in the right program. I didn't meet a single other person, interested in it. And, my interests in life required and involved cooperation with other people. Just learning a language involves participating with other people. The types of creative art I wanted to pursue, including filmmaking, including YouTube videos, involve collaboration with, cooperation with other people. I didn't choose to do something solitary in my life, like being a painter. My aspirations, whether humanitarian, political, linguistic, educational, otherwise, they all involved and required, working together with other people. And I've grown up with this crushing awareness that talent is scarce, that you have to make the best use possible of the few people who have something in common with you, have some common ground with you, or who have some capacity to sympathize with you and your ambitions in life. So branching off from just mentioning, I understand why certain friends in my life and certain friends in Melissa's life happen to be writing into us lately saying, oh, well, the world is getting worse and worse. And I've been hearing a lot of complaints about social media like Tinder and Twitter and TikTok and the way in which this is destroying the intellectual capacity of the American mind and the Western European mind and so on. And of course, I understand what it is they're complaining about, the people who say those things. But they can't imagine. And I would even say, if you're my age, if you're now 40 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old, it may be very hard for you now to imagine, even reflecting on your own life, for you to really think back to when you were a teenager and think about how alone you were, how utterly lacking in the kinds of alternative intellectual perspectives and personal experiences you were, that today we can take for granted, that today we can access through YouTube and through numerous other media as well. The people who talk to me, the people who've met me and contact me through this YouTube channel, through Patreon or through whatever messaging service, they are, for that reason, less alone. When I packed up my bags and moved to Cambodia, I didn't know anyone who'd gone to Cambodia. I didn't know anyone who'd done humanitarian work of any kind anywhere, not Cambodia specifically, not Laos. I had not met and spoken to anyone who had any relevant experience. I did meet and speak to the couple of professors I had in Asian studies and Buddhism, but they were guys who'd spent their whole careers standing around in front of a chalkboard, not going anywhere and not doing anything and not having any aspirations in life beyond having a comfortable income, frankly, ripping off one classroom full of students after another, year after year, as those students go thousands and thousands of dollars into debt and learn absolutely nothing that will ever earn them an income, and so on and so forth. It's quite a morally charged situation, even if it's not so intellectually stimulating, being in the classroom, being around professor that. But I remember I did talk to those guys. Now, today, obviously, I would have my fingertips, even if there were no interaction, I'd be able to watch and hear the reflections from people who've been through that, so on and so forth. And, you guys may have noticed here that I'm using the hashtag and the subtitle, that the personal is political, and, the political is person. There was a guy I met on Facebook many, many years ago. And, the way I met him is telling. I was sent a Facebook message from a complete stranger saying, stay away from this guy. He's dangerous. He's right-wing. He's romantically or sexually involved with teenage women who are much younger than him. He's some kind of terrible sexual predator. I received this message, and the person obviously had copied it and pasted it and sent it. The person sending the message, I'd never heard from before. I'd never spoken to before. And at this point, I was not a famous YouTuber. I wasn't even famous within veganism. I didn't have fame. I didn't have micro fame. The total number of views on my YouTube channel was, practically zero. But I had a blog that was quite well known. There were a lot of vegan activists who knew my work as text. I was well known within Buddhism, Theravada Buddhist studies, and some other things I've done in the past. But this was a real turning point in my life where I was just getting started on YouTube. And this was not the first time I'd seen this happen. Even though I hadn't yet been through what in the years to follow I would go through again and again and again of people making up stories about my sex life, people denouncing me publicly on the internet. I hadn't been through that yet. But I'd seen it already just on, Tumblr, the vegan activists of Tumblr. And there were people who went after me and tried to blacken my name on Tumblr who would later do it again on YouTube. So I had actually already seen this. I'd already been aware of this a couple times. So I received this anonymous message saying, don't talk to this guy. He's a terrible person. Like, he pretends to be a vegan activist, but really these are his sexual and political motives. And I'd never heard of that guy before either. There'd never been any contact between us whatsoever. So I get this message. I think, I'll bet he's doing something right. I'm going to look him up. He and I became friends for a couple of years. And I think you're about to hear why we became friends and how we became friends. But I'd never heard of this guy before. I get this one message saying he's this terrible, despicable human being and making all these damning allegations about his sex life. And, rather than me being prejudiced against him or being, I was thinking, Oh, look this guy up. I found his, back in those days, people would talk to you on Facebook. I think today they really don't. It's very hard to talk to a complete stranger on Facebook. By the way, that concludes me. If any of you guys in the audience try to talk to me on Facebook, I'm not going to talk to you. So I'm part of the problem here too. But I mean, social media has become less social in the passage of 20 years, but just even in the last 5 years, I would say everybody's more defensive and distant, and not without reason. Anyway, so I got touched this guy. And, I saw what he was doing on Facebook. He was making different kind of edgy political statements about veganism. And, he was saying that you don't have to be left-wing to be vegan. And he wasn't left-wing, and there was some kind of culture clash between him as a relatively conservative vegan and the far left-wing vegans who surrounded him. So this guy, he had a face that looked like an Italian-American movie star. And he was a bodybuilder. And he probably made himself look more Italian. I'm not saying this was intentional, but like a lot of bodybuilders, he was doing the kind of fake tan thing. So, I never asked, but, he had this kind of, he was rubbing himself with some kind of tanning fluid or something. A lot of bodybuilders do that to show off the curvature of their body more impressively. So that gave him this kind of artificial bronzed or dark brown look. A very handsome face. And he was a male bodybuilder who did stripping, heterosexual stripping, not for a living, not as a career, but kind of like every other weekend. He'd go and he'd dance for women at a strip club. And I think he sometimes also did, what are they called? Sorry, we say stag parties. What's the opposite? A doe party? Where women are celebrated. It's normally that a woman is getting engaged to be married, and they have a bunch of a bachelorette party. Thank you. So he would do these kinds of things at a woman's house. So the guy is very good looking, not just his body, but his face. He's vegan. I knew all kinds of details about his life and so on. And, one of the main things he talked to me about again and again was just how hopeless and depressing his personal life was, his sex life was, that he was all alone and he felt he was never going to be with anyone and so on and so forth. He talked about the isolation and misery he felt. He was politically isolated. He was morally isolated. Like, he regarded people who ate meat as immoral. He was also isolated in terms of drugs and alcohol. He didn't want to be part of that kind of party culture. One of the things that's a little bit unusual about him, and I remember joking about this with him. I said, dude, you are the most fastidiously clean heterosexual I've ever seen in my life. Like, he was one of these guys where his house reminded me of my grandmother's house, the interior decor and the way in which everything was spotless and strangely colored. It was this really weird, hokey interior decor style. And like a lot of vegans, he was taking care of animals. There were like rescued animals. Oh, this animal got hit by a truck and then he nursed it back to health. It was part of his kind of moral crusade. So again, for a lot of women, this is the ultimate guy. He is the macho man with a marshmallow middle. He's soft on the inside, but tough and masculine on the outside. He's, nursing these animals. And there's not a single hair. There's not a single dog hair or cat hair, or I forget if he was taking care of chinchillas or whatever. There's no hair on any couch or any surface. And it was something like, it was like, oh yeah, I vacuum every day. He vacuumed 7 days a week. Oh yeah, I vacuum all the furniture and carpets. And he's like, no, I don't know why people are lazy about this. Just, keep it up, just do the work. Obviously, the guy had a work ethic also for being a bodybuilder. But the life he described to me was so painfully, pathetically alone. And he said, there were women who would have sex with him, but the women who had sex with him, treated him like a male prostitute. He had completely shallow, exploitative, ultimately kind of hurtful and abusive relationships with women. He did sometimes meet women, when he was a stripper. There were women who met him on stage, so to speak. He did sometimes meet women in a kind of party scenario where everyone was a lot younger than he was and so on. He met women in different scenarios. And he came, I'm anonymizing this to some extent, but he came from one of those Rust Belt cities in the United States of America. He came from a city that is not considered, well, it's certainly not politically progressive, and it's not economically upwardly mobile, and so on and so forth. And, in every meaningful way, he just felt terribly alone. So this was a guy who, and by the way, also he was economically successful. He wasn't poor. He didn't need the money from stripping. He did strip as a kind of hobby, and probably also to reward him for all this work he does at the gym, staying in shape. But so he I think he owned his own house and he owned his own truck and all those things that American men tend to desire. And he described for me a life in which he met someone he could even have a conversation with, like once every 10 years. He said, looking back at his life, there were so few people he had, and it's partly why he was talking to me, why he cared about, the connection with me and so on. There were so few people he could talk to. There were so few people he could get along with. And even though there were women who would sleep with him, there were really no women who could even have a conversation with him over breakfast the next day, let alone have a long-term relationship, so on and so forth. I see other YouTubers, and I admit one that stands out in my mind before making this video is this remarkably awful but remarkably honest guy hiding in my room. So his name is Daniel. His YouTube channel and his internet identity is the phrase hiding in my room. And, I think hiding in my room really demonstrates this principle or this problem that I'm trying to talk about in this video. I'm trying to talk about the opposite. I'm trying to talk about what the alternative is. But this principle, this problem of regarding people as disposable, of regarding people as easily replaceable. And, so he's lately told some anecdotes. He is now bemoaning his fate and complaining that he's all alone and nobody wants him. He had a certain amount of fame on YouTube, which has been shrinking or contracting dramatically. So he has fewer and fewer viewers and less public interest. And he felt that he went through a period of time when he had a lot of public interest in his YouTube channel, where a lot of attractive women were talking to him or messaging him. And he did meet up with and have sex with several of them, and he treated them all as disposable. He presumed recklessly that, there'd be 10 more women for every woman he slept with and discarded this way. And, there's one who sticks out in my mind because he met up with her twice. He met up with her and had sex with her, I think, under a kind of no strings attached scenario, met up in a hotel room. But then this woman stayed in touch with him. And approximately 1 year later, she started writing to him again and asking if he'd consider being in a serious relationship with her. She had a boyfriend at that time. Her boyfriend became furious, and she broke up with her boyfriend dramatically and went over to meet up again with this guy, Daniel. And again, he's an awful person. It's an awful YouTube channel. But he is honest about precisely the things that most people are dishonest about. And yes, indeed, most men are dishonest about. And he had the honesty to say that he kind of met up with this girl and had sex with her. But all he was thinking about was how he could get back to his couch, get back to his computer, and resume playing, I think, Call of Duty, one of the current generation video games. I'm sorry if I'm getting the video game wrong, but one of these ridiculous, high definition graphic 3D video games that takes up hours and hours and hours of your life repetitively. Now, I am not here to imagine or suppose anything positive about this young woman. What I know about her is, Daniel, she likes you. She's interested in you. She's willing to give you a chance, and she's willing to give you a chance again. Like, she thought about it for a year, and she still likes you, and she's still interested in you. You still have something in common or some capacity there, right? And that's scarce. Talent is scarce, but like to really recognize, it's not the case that coming up next September, you're going to be forced to sit at the lunch table with 40 new people, that you're going to sit down in English class with 40 new people. Again, the school system conditions us to imagine that there's a whole new generation of friends and enemies for you arriving year after year like clockwork. There's no reunion coming up. When you find people you have some common ground with, even if it's just that, you have some sympathy with them and they have some interest in you, some curiosity about you. The word interest in English, unfortunately, has too many meanings. I mean, I guess I should say curiosity. You find someone who cares about you, someone who's curious about what you're doing next in your life, that's scarce. Talent is scarce, and you should cherish it. You should try to keep that person in your life, forever, in whatever capacity you can. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying you have to have a sexual relationship. I'm not saying you have to get married. I'm not saying you have to raise kids with someone just because you have this. But like, if you can keep that connection and build on it, despite the fact that there may be things terribly wrong with this person, they may have terrible failings, they may have terrible flaws, and you may be the friend who helps them, address some of those flaws. You may help them, develop into being a better person if you stay in their life, if they stay in yours. We're having elections here now in Canada, and some people asked me, as they always do, if I would stand in the elections myself, if I would run in the elections. Obviously, with no hope of winning the elections, but you'd at least be able to stand on a podium and make your speech, make your pitch. You'd be able to give a voice to the voiceless or give a perspective for some political cause. Now, I believe in order to do that, I would need to have 100 friends living in the same district of the city as I do. So they can't even be friends of mine who are out in the suburbs. They can't be friends of mine who are, frankly, walking distance from here. If you guys know this about electoral districts, when you draw the lines on a map, it's with an urban area, it's not a very big plot of land. I would have to know 100 people who are renting or owning a home within a very short walking distance of where I live. Okay. Now, here's what I have to say to you. It's not just that this is impossible for me now. It was impossible for me 5 years ago. It was impossible for me 10 years ago. Looking ahead to the future, it's going to continue to be impossible for me 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. It's going to be impossible for me for the rest of my life. I'm never going to have 100 friends living in one place at one time. I'm never going to have 100 colleagues living in one place at one time. Never. Not if I live in Montreal, not if I live in Vancouver, not if I live in Seattle. Right? And guys, I'm not saying this to insult you, but I'd like you to reflect about your own lives this way a little bit. Have you ever had 100 friends who would, it's not asking that much, who would sign a piece of paper so you could participate in the elections? You have to provide your ID card, you have to do a few things, who would sign the petition to let you stand in election. Again, knowing you wouldn't win, knowing you're not going to spend a lot of money, but you're going to say, hey, look, there are some issues I really think are important to talk about, and this is an opportunity for me to try to shift public opinion, try to inform people, try to have my voice count in our pseudo-democracy, just a little bit, to do my public service. And again, so I mean, looking forward to the future, everyone thinks about the sex issue this way. I mean, everyone thinks about whether or not they're going to have a girlfriend or they're going to have a wife. If it's women, whether they're going to have a husband. If they're gay, whether or not they're going to have some kind of partner. And a lot of us think about whether we're going to have just one wife or we're going to have two or three. Yeah, sure, there's that too. And there are gay couples. Are they going to have a quadrilateral relationship? Are they going to have okay, on that scale, people do a lot of thinking about their social connections, right? They do a lot of thinking about being alone, and then what's the opposite of being alone? What's being counterposed to being alone? Okay, but how would you live your life differently if you were trying to get to that level of social organization where you have 100 friends who all live in the same district geographically, who all live in the same town or the same neighborhood with you? Think about what a monumental task that would be. Ask yourself how you would even go about doing it, and what you'd have to sacrifice, what you have to do to. Made a live stream recently. Oh, sorry. So thanks, Brendan. Brendan says pseudo-democracy. I like that. If you read my book, No More Manifestos, I'll write the title for what it's worth. It's not available yet. It's going to be on Amazon. But I have a book I'm writing, doing the final edits and revisions now, which could go on for some time. ODS found new typos today. I got a bunch of messages of typos to correct from ODS. So he's still finding typos. And when I go through it, I find commas I want to move and stuff like that too. So I'm trying to make it perfect, which wasn't the original plan of the book. Anyway, yes, in No More Manifestos, I don't talk about pseudo-democracy. I talk about the way in which our system of democracy has produced the opposite of democracy. I introduced this concept that basically hasn't existed in political science before of the society without polity. So it's a lot of the book. It's a critique of democracy, but an in-depth, meaningful critique. It goes back to ancient Athens and ancient Rome. It goes back to the writing of the American Constitution, the American Revolution. You know, it goes back to ancient China. Talks about Lord Shang and Sun Tzu and Confucius. So there's a lot of philosophical depth and breadth. And also a lot of the book is talking about police brutality in the United States, in the United States of America, and how that relates to our system of education, our system of law, so on and so forth. So the book means a lot to me. I hope it means a lot to you. Yeah, it's just fun. Okay, this is my point. It's easy to visualize your ambitions in terms of things, in terms of palpable things. It's not just easy. To be honest with you, I think that's a pretty reliable sign of stupidity. If you ever meet someone and talk to them and you say, oh, well, what's your ambition? I mean, however it comes up in conversation naturally. Presumably it's not like a survey and you're just asking what's your ambition. You meet someone and they say, oh, every day they get up and they visualize a red sports car that's made in Italy. You know, this is their ambition. Their ambition is to drive this red sports car. And, you know, we see these kinds of cars on the street here every so often, depending on where you live. It's probably because of the climate here. There are a lot of people with expensive cars here because there's not too much snow and what have you. You know? And I always make jokes about it. They're not even really great jokes, but I always kind of joke around with most. Oh, this is the meaning of my life. I can't be happy until I'm driving a bright red Jaguar like this asshole. You know, like, oh yeah, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm motivated by. You know, so it's not just that it's easy. I think it's a pretty reliable sign of stupidity that you have aspirations and ambitions defined in terms of simple, palpable things. There's another kind of aspiration or ambition that's maybe more impalpable, but it's something like writing a book. It's something like making YouTube videos. It's something, maybe it's an art form, maybe it's not creative, maybe it's a status or social position you want to attain in life. I was reading the other day about a guy who was lamenting that his father's dream was to become a chief petty officer in the U.S. military, and his father never achieved that dream because he chose to take care of his own kid. He kind of dropped out of the military to spend more time with his son. And this is really like, well, gee, you never made CPO, you never made the rank of chief petty officer. It's just kind of ridiculous to me. But no, I mean, it's a step up. It's a step up from wanting to own a red sports car. So you have some idea. You want to be a doctor. You want to be a dentist. You want to be a pilot. You want to be a chief petty officer in the military. There's some rank, there's some status, there's some role you want to play. I think that kind of ambition and aspiration almost inevitably leads to tragedy and self-hatred. And certainly my professors here at the University of Victoria, my professors before at the University of Toronto, most of the people I knew with PhDs, whether in England or France or in China, I knew a lot of people with PhDs in Asia. Most of them were trapped in the nightmare of having lived out their dream and discovered that it wasn't worth living, wasn't worth dreaming either. You know, they found out what it really meant to be a university professor and have a PhD, and they were horrified by it and disgusted with themselves, and a great deal of self-loathing and disappointment as a result. Okay, that's another kind of ambition and aspiration. But you know what the most powerful and most effective form of ambition and aspiration is to have of all? It's people. All right. You know what? Swords can't accomplish a whole hell of a lot. Having 100 men who are willing and able and motivated to make use of those swords changes the course of history, right? You can own a lot of pencils and pens. I mean, I do. I don't collect them or anything. I've always got a lot of them around. You notice that about me if you come to my apartment. It's partly because I've studied so many languages. You know what? Having 100 pens, it's not going to change the world. It's not going to accomplish much. If you have 100 authors, if you know 100 writers who are motivated positively somehow to make the world a better place, there's something they want to change. There's something they have in common with you where you want to work together. If you have a salon of talented people, that can change the world. And obviously we think of Shakespeare as one person, right? But his significance arose out of many people working together at every stage, including the writing, right? Shakespeare alone, Shakespeare in a vacuum would resemble a vacuum, and all of his efforts and artistry would disappear into a vacuum. He needed a critical mass, whether it was 20 people, 40 people, or 100 people, to work together to make Shakespeare matter, to make his writing matter, to change the world. When your ambitions are not based on things, and they're not based on a rank, like, a job title or certification or something. When your ambitions are based on people, it's not just that they're more powerful, they're also more malleable. They can change, right? If you have 100 people who are motivated to work together to get you elected in government, and it doesn't have to be me. I don't care. If I knew 100 people here, I'd be totally happy to be some of the brains behind someone else's campaign. I could ghost write their speeches. It doesn't have to be my face in the front. I'm not an egomaniac about that. I really don't care. Now, I can contribute in other ways to other political causes. Or whether it's a political cause as blatant as participating in elections, or it is something more like humanitarian work. It's political and changing the world, but not in an electoral way. If you have 100 people who are motivated and eager and willing and organized to help you participate in an election, and let's just say it's an election you cannot win. You cannot win, but you can get up there on the podium and you can eloquently speak for whatever the issue is that unites these guys. Maybe you're anti-war, maybe you're pro-war, maybe you're anti-torture, maybe you're, anti-vivisection, or I don't know. You want to save the cows, or you want to save the whales, or you want to save something, whatever it is that draws you people together. If you have those people, and they don't just know you, they know one another, right? There are bonds of mutual trust and mutual respect. It's not like a whole bunch of points united in the middle, just one point. You have 100 points that are all connected in multiple ways to one another. All of them have been out to picnics with one another. Maybe not all at the same time. They're all connected one way or another. Okay. Once you've done that, you could turn around and you can mobilize those people to instead take on a humanitarian project. You can mobilize those people to instead make a film. You can mobilize those people to make change in the world in so many different ways, to do something creative, to do something politically significant, right? Once you have people, you have the potential to do anything. When you have a job title, you have the potential to do one thing. And when you have an object like an expensive car, you have the potential to do nothing. Okay. Talent is scarce. I know I have people in the audience of all different ages. I have some people who watch my channel who are 17. Some of them started watching like 5 years ago. And I have people in my audience who are probably more than 70 years old. I can't remember 70-year-olds. At least I have people in their 50s. If you're over 70, send in more fan mail. I don't get that much fan mail for people in their 70s, probably because they don't write a lot of email. But they don't participate. They don't support me on Patreon. That's the problem. If you're over 70, you should be supporting me on Patreon. Anyway, I have people of all ages. Now I am not asking this in a generalized or abstract way. When you think back to your own time in university, how many of those people that you knew in university do you wish you still knew today, you could still cooperate with today, you could still collaborate with today? Whether that's you want to make a film together, whether it's you want to open a bakery together. So it's another good example, something that has some long-term commitment to it. You want to organize to do something politically or creatively or in terms of business. You want to do something. How many of those people that you knew in university do you wish you still knew today? Now I have a further question. Like, if you actually got out a pencil and paper and wrote down their names, if you looked them up on Facebook, you just managed to find the name, you just search, how many of them do you think you'd still want to meet up with just after looking at their Facebook profile, just seeing what they've been doing in the last 5 or 10 years? Talent is scarce. And as we get older, it gets scarcer. There were very few people who were politically active when I was in high school. There was one girl. I mean, I can tell this whole story. It's burned into my memory forever. And, things changed. I was a teenager myself. I think the second last year of high school this was for me. It could have been third last year, but no, it wasn't right at the end of high school. It was more like the middle of high school. And, there was this girl. I didn't really perceive her that way at the time, but I can now recognize she was stunningly gorgeous. At the time, you're not an adult. You don't, like, you're a teenager. You can't even distinguish like good chocolate from bad chocolate. You don't have a refined taste in life. I knew she was good looking, but I didn't really think of her that way. I didn't think of her as an extraordinarily, good looking person. And, I was a good talker for my age. And, like all these people, I didn't regard her as a celebrity or a model, or so. I didn't regard her as anything. I regarded her as a real person, and I talked to her like a real person. I talked to her the same way I talked to a man. And I didn't ever have a class with her actually. It was an unusual thing. I had a really brief window of opportunity where I think just for 2 days she and I were in the same classroom. It was like a special orientation thing. It wasn't a normal class we had to go. So we were going to be in the classroom for 2 days. And I made the effort. I remember I really kind of lined up. So, okay, so on the first day, I'm going to talk to her and I'm going to take it this far. And then on the second day, I'm going to seal the deal and I'm going to take this girl out, Anyway, look, sorry. So honestly, it's one of the only women in my life I've made that kind of effort for. I'm just being real with you. It's pretty rare. I had to get up and hustle to make this connection happen. And we didn't have a whole hell of a lot in common. And we spent a certain number of hours talking to each other and getting to know each other. I didn't hear after that. I didn't hear anything about her for years. I had a couple conversations there. We had some degree of contact. I heard years later that her parents had been fundamentalist Christians. She got pregnant with some guy who only slept with her once and never talked to her again. Her parents said, no, they don't believe in abortion. So she was going to have the baby and raise the baby. And I didn't stay in touch with her. I didn't know. So that might have been the last year of high school, to be honest with you. Something like that. If it was, you're pregnant for 9 months. But I think maybe she got pregnant during her last month of high school and the baby was right after that. Her life changed. And, the main thing I remember about her, of course, are her political pretensions at the time. And, I was looking for someone who was interested in politics and trying to make the world a better place. And I could sit here now and ridicule what her political beliefs were and her political projects. I really could. But of course, I was somewhat ridiculous myself as a teenager in my political aspirations. And today I literally would not be able to remember her name today. Absolutely not. But at some point, like 10 years after or 15 years after high school, someone said her name to me under some kind. I was like, oh yeah, right. And I just did that bare minimum effort thing. I just went to Facebook and put in her name, and there were a couple people with the name, and but oh yeah, that's the one. Fine if you say. So I'll be honest with you. No, That is not someone I never thought I wish I could meet up with her again. I never thought, oh, I wish that person was still in my life. I never thought that was someone I could still be working with in politics or someone I could get together with romantically. Never. I never had that kind of nostalgia over her. Not once, not even for 5 minutes. But my point is, in my whole high school experience, that was maybe the one person who cared about politics, who had any kind of spark of potential or ambition or wanting to change the world, make the world a better place. And, I guess I did kind of wonder if her political beliefs and aspirations had mutated or progressed past that very primitive stage they're at. And I had no idea her parents, or at least her mother, was some kind of crazy Christian fundamentalist. I had no idea that was part of her backstory, how she came into this, scenario. Not to put too fine a point on it, Melissa and I have talked about moving to different parts of the world. It's been a long list in the last couple of years. What do we want to do? Where do we want to live? What kind of ambitions do we have? And, one of the differences between different places is to ask, could we have any friends here? If we moved to this place, would we just live totally alone? It would just be the two of us, and we'd be regarded as kind of a hated outsider and unwanted eccentric by other people if we moved to that place? Or is this a place where there'd be enough people who have a lot of things in common with us that we could really have colleagues, we could really have friends, even if it's just 5, 10, 15 people who want to share your life and have some of the same ambitions and, want to make something positive happen. Now, one of the possibilities on the list was moving back to the state of Michigan. Now, I'm saying the state of Michigan specifically, non-specifically, because there were several different cities in Michigan we could move to, each with different, each entailing different advantages and disadvantages, you might say. But something I said to Melissa again and again about Michigan was, look, there are disadvantages to moving to Michigan. It's cold in winter. It's awful. It's not paradise. Nobody wants to retire there. Nobody wants to live there. You know what I mean? I said, but that is the one place in the world where you, Melissa, can be involved in politics and you can stand for office and run for elections and you can really say you grew up here. Anywhere else, if we move to Oregon, all your life in Oregon, people are going to say, you're not from around here. You're not one of us. I know it may seem like the cultural difference between Michigan and Oregon is not worth talking about. Well, that's not how Oregonians see it. They'll say, you ain't from around here, stranger. You're some weird eccentric from Detroit, and you're never going to be one of us. You can never be part of our political struggle and never part of our culture, so on and so forth. Now, I think it is needless to say, just to put this in the sharp relief, some of you guys remember this, some of you don't. I considered formally and permanently moving to Israel. I considered applying for Israeli citizenship, which I'm entitled to because of my Jewish ancestry, and then permanently living in Israel for the rest of my life. I think that's a very good illustration of the kind of invidious isolation you could live in politically. Think about someone like me living in Israel. Think about someone like me, at least hypothetically, having a child and raising a child in Israel. By the way, I don't have to have another kid. I already have one kid. I'm perfectly fine living the rest of my life without having another kid, but hypothetically, I'd be a member of a subculture within a subculture within a subculture. My status within Israel would be that all of the Jewish people would hate me for not being Jewish enough. I'm an atheist, in case anyone guess. And of course, meanwhile, the Muslim people, Palestinians, and so on and so forth, Arab Israelis, they would hate me for being Jewish. You're excluded both ways. I would never be part of the Russian community. I'm not Russian enough. I am somewhat Russian. There really isn't any community there I'd be a part of. I would be part of a tiny, tiny sub-community of, aggressively atheist, modern, secular intellectuals in a country that's basically a theocracy, a country that has, state-mandated religion, state-mandated military service, and that is, constantly struggling on the brink of destruction. It's in a struggle for its existence at all times. So as unreasonable as Israeli politics may be, they seem reasonable when placed in that dire context. But I live with the same kind of invidious isolation here and now. It's less extreme. It's less obvious. But I mean, when I made the YouTube videos talking about how everyone who lives in this apartment building hates me, I did that for a reason. I was trying to show a broader point. And it's hard to show the significance of an absence in your life. What I'm trying to indicate to you right now with this video is there are 100 people out there who should still be in my life, and they're not. All right? There were 100 people I knew when I was doing humanitarian work in Vientiane, the capital city of Laos, and none of them are with me today. There were 100 people I knew in Bangkok, Thailand. There were 100 people I knew in Chiang Mai, various phases, including the vegans, the vegan activists I knew in Chiang Mai, like people who spoke English. There were 100 people in Kunming, China. There weren't 100 people, but maybe there were 10 people in Dehong, China. It was a small town. There were 100 people when I lived in Cambridge, England, and when I took the bus back and forth between Cambridge and Oxford. So we could count more people. I knew people at Cambridge. I knew people at Oxford. I knew people at the University of London. Right? Any of those people could still be a positive part of my life today, and they're not. There were 100 people I knew in France. Sure, including some vegan activists, by the way. At every phase of my life, at every stage of my life, there were these people I reached out to and who I shared my life with, and that I was warm and encouraging and positive to, right? And each and every one of them, for various specific reasons, they did not give that warmth and positivity back. In every single one of those places, there were women who tried to fuck me. Okay? And I know, it's so different the way we see these things with the genders, right? I described to you before the beginning of this video, I knew this guy was a male bodybuilder and a male stripper, and he was all alone. There were women offering to have sex with him. Some of the women did have sex. He did have sex with women. Some of those women were married. There were married women who went and met him at a strip club or met him at a nightclub or something, and they were cheating on their husband with him. But, there were women, some of them were women who were like teenagers. They were like 19 years old or something and met him and wanted to have sex with him, even though he was an older guy. So they weren't married, but again, they were young women who really just regarded him as a one-night stand, as a very shallow sexual interaction. Now, the women I'm alluding to, I didn't have sex with any of them. I don't play hard to get. I actually am hard to get. But in all these places, there were women coming at me. And I think, we have to be really open to looking at male and female sexuality equally in these things. Like, I think those women who were coming at me, their interests and their intentions and how we should morally characterize this, it is neither more black nor more white. It is neither more evil nor more good than, men looking for fundamentally kind of exploitative, disposable sexual relations in the same situation. Like, if the genders were reversed, we should regard it the same way. So, I am not saying I was ever alone in this sense. I'm not even saying I was lonely. Famously, I once sat down and wrote a German exam, a German assignment, and I wrote that phrase. And I remember the professor, being honest. So it was a good-looking young female German professor, and she was trying to sleep with me. She tried repeatedly to sleep. She tried to have a sexual affair with me. I was over 18, but not much. I forget how young I was. But I remember I wrote as the answer to this question on a German assignment in class, "Nie einsam, immer allein." So this is kind of untranslatable play on words, where it's like, there's a difference. I'm not lonely. I'm alone, But, in all these places, I was neither lonely nor was I alone. And look, you can look at my life as a succession of tragedies, series of tragedies and failures. You can look at my life basically just being kind of wonderful. It's not like there is any particular triumph or accomplishment, but it's wonderful. It's wonderful that I've been able to live in all these places and have these experiences, that I've been able to become the person I am today and had the education I've acquired, and that I'm able to now write this book and make these YouTube. There is a sense in which it's kind of wonderful. even if it's just as a gestalt. It's the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Like even if you add together failure and failure and failure and failure, somehow it becomes this kind of wonderful success. It's this life that's worth living and meaningful and rewarding for me. You can look at it that way. The point is, I'm trying to really draw attention to the significance of that absence. There are 100 people missing there. And in a lot of ways, that's much more than 100 people that are missing. And the only people, this comes back to the title of this video, in terms of talent is scarce. The only people who even get back in touch with me after not talking to me for years, it's always women trying to have sex with me. Always. It's women who remembered me. They remembered me as an option. And then they think something like, oh, I heard that guy got divorced, or they don't even know. Maybe he's single now. Like years have gone by. They're single now. Like maybe when I knew them, they were married and now they're divorced, or whatever their situation is, or something's getting to them. Dude, that does happen to me. And it does creep me out. I'm just being real with you. And, with all those things too, it's like, well, I'm sorry, where were you when I created Leviathan? Where were you when I was going through all this stuff in my life? Well, what? You're interested in me now for this reason, for this narrowly selfish, self-serving reason, that you think you can fit me into this position in your life now that you've broken up with your husband or broken up with your boyfriend or whatever it is. I'm just being honest with you. The only people from my past who get back in touch in that way, it's always women where something clicked, something reminded, and they reached out to get in touch with me that way. I'm just going to take a moment to look at your comments, guys. Thanks for writing in. Thanks for joining the live stream. So yeah, Ron Sims comments. He's referring back to when I said, if you can remember the people you knew in high school, you remember the people you knew in university, and then you take a look at their Facebook profiles, how many of them would you want in your life today? So Ron Sims says most of them are either alcoholics, druggies, or just don't care about the world, and it's sad. Okay, so Ron, this is the only question I have for you is, how many of them really display that to you on their Facebook profile? Like, I'm agreeing with you, but I think the problem is way worse. Like, I think there are so many people who are alcoholics, but if you look at their Facebook profile, they look sober. You know what I mean? I think there are people whose lives are a disaster, but you look at their Facebook profile and you think their life is wonderful. Like they think, I just say there's a natural misrepresentation there that creeps in. So I'm not disagreeing with you at all, Ron, but to be able to pierce the veneer of respectability and know what someone's really done with their life and who they are today, that's quite another matter. Okay, one of the only times I was ever at a party, it was a cocktail party. It was a cocktail party in a loft. One of the only times I've been to a party like that, and there were people there who knew me from high school. So this has happened once in my life, ever. So Melissa, I think you've never heard this. It's not that great a story, but I think you've never heard this. It's not the kind of thing I do ever. And I didn't know that was the situation I was walking into. It was like, I go to this party. I was told I was going to, anyway, it's not worth saying why I was at this party. But anyway, I go to this party and there were actually a bunch of different people who knew me from high school there, and, they didn't freak out, but it was kind of like, oh, there was a little, mutual recognition and surprise when I walked into the room. And anyway, the party had, I think, 2 hosts, maybe 3. They were roommates who rented this loft. It was a big space, big post-industrial space. You got to split the rent up between a few people. And this guy comes over to me, and I'm standing there in this very self-confident, I'm much taller than him, silent way, but I'm quite still. You'll see why this matters, the story. And he's very jumpy and agitated. And he's saying a bunch of things to me in this kind of excitable, aimless way. He's kind of, and I'm standing there perfectly still, staring at him. And again, the seriousness of my demeanor is part of what made this so hilarious. And then I snap my finger and say, I was certain I knew I'm screwing up the joke now. Sorry. I was certain I knew you from somewhere. You and I have the same Coke dealer. And the guy, he's all jumpy, he's all screwed up. He looks at me and he's like, "Oh, you know Tom?" And I said to him, "No, I was joking. You weren't." I don't know Tom. I don't know Tom at all. You know, and the funny thing was, his roommate was there. The roommate was a very unusual character. She was a very, anyway, she was a very bossy, very self-confident person. She was not a mousy, pervasive person. She had no idea this guy was a cocaine addict. She'd been living with the guy, and I think she had attributed his behavior to something else. You know what I mean? I saw him, and I basically thought, I diagnosed this as a cocaine addict, and I confronted him. She'd been living in the same. So it's kind of an interesting little moment at a house party that had long-term implications to people involved. That's who you're living with. That's who this guy is. He knows Tom. So my point is, that moment pierced and you could see it in terms of the other people reacting. It pierced the veneer of respectability this guy had maintained, even with his own roommates or housemates, and it pierced the veneer he was trying to maintain with the other people at this party. So all I'm saying is, to what extent do people intentionally or unintentionally create an alter ego, whether it's on Facebook, on Instagram, or whereby they would not admit to you these things? They would not, So, yeah. Okay. So Ron, I'm still replying to you in a deeper sense, not replying to the wording of what you said, but replying to this point you raised. Okay. I said before, there's this absence in my life I'm trying to draw attention to, right? There are 100 people who should be here with me now, should be sharing my life, and they're not. I think the single most important reason is that those people are ashamed of themselves, and they don't feel that they have a life worth sharing. Now, I'm a warm person and I'm a caring person. You might not always get that impression of me on YouTube, but if you see the way I actually am with people I know and care about in real life, I am. But that kindness comes from a kind of strength. When I meet people and talk to people, whether they're a complete stranger or they're someone I've known for 10 years or 20 years, right? I have so much to share. Like, there's so much in my life I feel is worth talking about and meaningful, and then I want to share with you. Like, I'm sorry, but just talk about like a normal kind of crappy conversation with a friend of yours. If you have a friend and they're complaining about breaking up with their girlfriend, or they're complaining about a conflict at work with their boss or something, I'm someone who can be caring and engaged even on something that's shallow, because I really feel I have a lot to share from my own life, and I want to share that with you, and so on and so forth. And of course, obviously, I am even more willing to share if we're going to talk about politics or history or matters of real substance. But you can see that even on my YouTube channel. I mean, I'm willing to talk about tourism with a kind of philosophical rigor. Oh, you want to talk about tourism in Thailand? Okay, I can talk about that for an hour. There's something I have to share there. And I'm willing to talk about gossip, and I'm willing to talk about your sex life in a profound and meaningful and seriously engaged way, right? But it's not, it's not because I'm needy. You know what I mean? It's not because I'm nosy. I'm not. I really don't ask questions about the people in my life. I really let them tell me whatever it is they want to tell me. And sometimes they get pissed off at me for that, because I'm not asking the kind of intrusive questions that they expect their friends to ask, and that I guess their other friends ask. That's come up in a few of my relationships. But I go into it with this kind of context that I have a lot to share. I'm not ashamed of who I am. I'm not ashamed of what I'm sharing. All right. I gotta tell you, the people I've known in life, including the people who got PhDs, especially the people who got PhDs, they don't want to talk to me, and they don't want to hang out with me because they're ashamed of themselves. because they've accomplished so little in the last 5 years of any substance. And what they have accomplished, they're not proud of. They feel stupid when they're around me. They feel like they've been wasting their time when they're around me. They feel like they haven't been living up to any of their own hype. Like the last time they talked to me, they told me they were doing X, Y, and Z. And then here they are 5 years later. And, and I'm just to be honest with you, I have had people tell me that. I've had people not indirectly, I've had people directly tell me that whenever they talk to me, or I remember one guy said, whenever he hears someone else talk about me behind my back, saying about what I've been up to, he said he felt ashamed of himself. He said he felt he was living in slow motion, that I was out like living in fast forward. I was doing all these things. And, here he was years going by and not accomplishing anything and nothing changing and not taking any risks and not living up to his own hype. Now, that was mostly intellectually not living up to their own hype. And by the way, I'm not saying this to hate. You may know people right now who say they're going to write a novel and years go by and where's the novel at? They even say they're going to read a book. Years go by and haven't read the book, let alone, writing a book, whatever their projects are, whatever their aspirations are. And look, so again, I was just saying when it's something like alcoholism or cocaine, it's hidden, right? So I had that moment at a cocktail party where you can break through the surface and expose someone. It's kind of horrible. I doubt it motivated him to get sober. But I knew I recognized you from somewhere. How can you have that moment? How can you have that snapping your fingers moment and reveal that someone's a video game addict, right? And I'm not saying everyone accomplishes nothing in life because they're a video game addict. Some people accomplish nothing because they spend their time on Reddit reading gossip about other people's lives. They spend their time watching reruns of The Simpsons TV show, of The Family Guy, watching situation comedies, watching movies. Like, it's not always video games. You know what I mean? Video games are kind of a convenient way to indicate this. A lot of people spend years of their life doing absolutely nothing in particular, just self-indulgent, miscellaneous waste of time with no ambitions. And again, if they tell people they have ambitions, then they feel ashamed of seeing those people again because they haven't been. I told Melissa about one of these women, and when she got back in touch with me years later, she probably was trying to say she got back in touch with me right after I got divorced, right after I split up with my ex-wife. So it probably was what she had in her mind. But I remember that it was like she hadn't talked to me for like 6 years. It's like, oh yeah, 6 years ago you said you were almost completed your PhD, like you're at the end of your PhD program at the dissertation stage. And like, oh, here we are 6 years later, and you haven't finished your PhD. And in her case, I would guess marijuana was a factor, or just whatever, something like this, lackadaisical hippie lifestyle, whatever it is. So look, I'm just saying, people share their lives with other people out of strength, not weakness. And when people tell me that they're shy, I say, no, you're not. You're ashamed of yourself. We have this false stereotype that someone who is gregarious and self-confident is a psychopath. I see this being said even about salesmen, that like a good salesman is a psychopath or a sociopath because he's willing to walk up to a stranger and say, hey, I'm going to sell you a pair of car tires that's better than the car tires you have before. No, he's not. No, he's not. He's positively motivated. He's motivated because he actually believes he has a good product to sell you. He actually believes these car tires are going to save you money in the long run or something. And he actually wants to make the sale. He actually does. When you're positively motivated to do something, you're not shy. You know who's shy? People who are ashamed of themselves. People who feel like the product they're selling isn't really any good anyway, and you shouldn't really be doing this job. Oh, now you're starting to get shy. Okay. Now it's not that direct. It's not that easy. It's not that simple. But there is a connection between the fact that you are playing video games for 20 hours a week and the fact that you're shy, that you don't want to share your life with other people. that you don't want to spend time with other people, or that you're only willing to share your life with other people when you already know in advance that they're wasting their time in the same way, that they're not going to judge you, that they're not going to make you feel bad about yourself. That when you meet up with them, even if you just meet up for coffee with no ambitions to run in an election, no plans to make a film, no plans to save the world, that when you meet up with them for coffee and they say, so, what did you do this week? Where you won't feel embarrassed and you won't feel bad about yourself at all, where you say, oh, well, didn't really do anything. The new version of that video game came out, so I played that a lot. So guys, just, most of you, okay, you know me. If this is the first time you've ever seen this YouTube channel, but you've watched the whole video up to this point, you know me. How do you think my friends feel when they're in that situation and they talk to me that way? Whatever the project is, whatever the aspiration is, whatever they're trying to do, including I've known people who were aspiring YouTubers. I knew one guy who was a complete asshole, such a piece of crap, that guy. He was in a PhD program that he dropped out of. He dropped out of a PhD program to make YouTube videos full time. And when he talked to me, we had this long Skype call. He was 100% confident. He understood YouTube better than me, and he understood vegan activism better than me. And he had all these aspirations. He was telling me how to do my job, and I was laughing at him. He didn't know what he was talking about. He dropped out of a PhD program to have a career on social media and make YouTube videos. And I wrote to him, it was 2 years later, minimum. I remember it was like, hey, bro, where are the YouTube videos at? I remember you used to have a YouTube channel. It's you made all those posts, you made all those comments. You were going to leave me in your shadow. You were going to totally eclipse what I've accomplished on YouTube. You ain't even got 5 views, bro. What happened to all that, Oh, gee, you actually dropped out of your PhD program and you just became a self-pitying piece of shit, huh? Gee, what happened? What happened, bro? Whether it's that you're talking to someone who's a friend of yours about what did you do this last week? What did you do what are you going to do next weekend? Or you're looking back at the last 2 years of your life, last 5 years of your life. You're looking forward to the next 5 years of your life. You're like, hey, bro, where's it at? I make people feel bad about themselves precisely because I feel good about myself. Okay? You think I have any regrets about what I did during coronavirus? Do you think I feel like I wasted the last 10 months of my life? Not a goddamn bit of it. I am so grateful I was stuck in this apartment reading books for 10 months. Reading books and writing books and sharing my life with you people on the internet through YouTube. Are you kidding me? The value of what I did stuck in this apartment for the last 10 months compared to what I did in university, actually taking classes in university, it's no comparison. It's been absolutely wonderful. It's been tremendously meaningful. It's been tremendously rewarding. You know who gets real shy around me? You know who's shy? People who took the last 10 months and they played The Legend of Zelda on Nintendo Switch for 200 hours. And then maybe they played Animal Crossing for 400 hours, Having ambition involves failure. It involves being willing to fail again and again and again. Not having ambition involves shame and shyness. It's a totally self-serving delusion to think that self-confident, gregarious, warm people who go out and share their lives with others are egomaniacs or psychopaths or sociopaths or trying to manipulate you. This is the shy people of the world trying to justify their own shyness, trying to claim that human nature is always shy unless there's some ulterior motive, unless this person is a con artist, unless this person is a salesman, unless this person is a cult leader, the ultimate example of a so-called sociopath or psychopath, unless this person is a charismatic cult leader trying to recruit you. This is the dominance of the shy in the 21st century, okay? You're not shy. You're ashamed of yourself. You're ashamed of who you are. You're ashamed of the extent to which you have squandered your own potential. Okay. Those of us who are out here willing and able and trying to share our lives with others, we do it out of strength, not weakness. And there are so few people who are strong enough to reciprocate that warmth and just share their own life in return, even if their life has, struggles and disappointments and tragedies and setbacks and failures, even if you have to fail 10 times before every one project that succeeds. There's still a difference between whether you fail with other people or if you fail alone. If you share your sorrow, if you share your suffering with others, or if you're in a state of sorrow and suffering alone, it still matters, right? And everything worth doing involves cooperation with other people, even learning a language. You can't even learn Chinese alone. Talent is scarce. You can be strong. You can stop being ashamed of your own life. You can stop being shy. You can get ready to share your life with other people, to collaborate and work with 10 other people or 100 other people. You can even make that your conscious goal, right? The problem is you can't be strong for anyone else. You can only be strong for yourself. And then you get to see just how alone you are, because your strength makes other people aware of their weakness. Ladies and gentlemen, whether we're talking about your personal life, your professional life, or your political life, in this sense, talent is scarce.